Hello, everyone. This is Daryl Andrews, Coach D, the um, workforce development motivator. I'm also a strategist and a trainer and consultant to workforce groups and organizations and businesses, schools and school districts throughout the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean. And just wanted to take a moment and talk about a subject that obviously is penetrating the heart of our nation, um, and causing a lot of friction in organizations and communities and businesses and a variety of different places throughout the country. And I'm gonna do my best to try to share this information from a different perspective, because as I look at the bigger picture, hey Stacy, how you doing? It's good to see you. Hope all is well. Um, it's good to see you. Do have comment sections here if you want to comment on some of this. Be feel free to. But what I'm going to be sharing from you is not from a person who just came up with an idea and decided to start talking about this. It's something I kind of been sharing for a lot of years. A lot of times in schools and school districts and various government and workforce organizations, and some businesses as well, but definitely in those two arenas on more of a consistent basis. But I want to talk about a subject that is we need to start really thinking about, because I think about our country and I wonder sometime how we're going to be able to, quote unquote, be this phenomenal, amazing nation if we don't sit down and come to a realization of what's taking place and how do we fix this problem. Because you and I know it is a problem, and it's been a problem for a lot of years in our country. But the challenge becomes whenever you talk about the problem, of race and race relations, you basically end up with a warfare. You got this side that thinks one thing and this side that thinks the other, and it's a warfare, man. I mean, it's interesting. On Facebook, I just have basically pulled away now because I'm saying, man, as soon as a person says something, it's just full blown warfare when it comes to race relations. And it's interesting to me is that instead of us looking at why do we see things the way we see them, the immediate response to a lot of this is conflict. It's just conflict. And so what I've been doing, I do my work in this arena is has a lot to do with equity. And what I've been doing is trying to educate people on something that most people have no idea of. They have no idea of. And it's something we all are challenged with in our own right. Okay. And we all have challenges with it. But in order for it to change, here's the thing. We have to recognize it exists. If we don't recognize that it exists, we can never change. And so this is, obviously Caucasians, but also in cases, Black Americans. We have certain things in our lives that are what I call implicit biases. And Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt's book, Bias, is the best book in the country from my perspective that talks about this. And that's where I do a lot of my work from. But we don't realize that we have them until sometimes we stumble upon them. And then we start, and then we have a recognition of the fact that this bias exists. Now, let me clarify something because I want to make this extremely clear. There are some people out there who are racist. Now, let's just be real about that. They're just racist. I mean, they were born to be racist. They despise Black people, brown people, Mexicans. It don't matter who it is. They're just racist. And those folks need help. I mean, they just need somebody to really help them understand that's wrong. You shouldn't think about people like that. It's sad that after, so many years, you're still dealing with that. So you got that. But then you got some people who simply lack knowledge. They've seen things and done things for so long that it's just normal to them, and they don't know that it's considered biased because that's all they've ever done. So they may not be falling to the category of racist. They just may fall into the category of uninformed. And so what I try to do is inform people so that they can start realizing the way you think about that situation is wrong. Now, it's informed people, but listen, I've had situations in my life where I had to be informed. I'm going to show you two scenarios. One is a scenario as far as black man, it's me as a black man. And then I'm going to share a story of a bias against me as a black man. So I'm going to talk about me having a bias and a bias perpetuated against me. So you can see the two different scenarios here. So my wife and I met years ago working with youth. And we would take youth up to the Pocono Mountains. I mean, a lot of young folks. We had all these young folks from all over the country that we would take, well, sure say the Northeast, that we would take up to the Poconos. And we would spend time with them talking about life skills and soft skills. And it was a Christian base. So we talked about the word of God, and it was powerful. We had a great time with these kids. So we started doing that. I think for 3 or 4 years we did that. Well, one year we had a group of kids that came from this little town called Perth Amboy, New Jersey. And I'll never forget this. Now, the kids that I work with came from a town in Pennsylvania, suburban town, situation, mom, dad, whatever. And, so we operated in a certain mode. And that group that we were with, this other group didn't come from that kind of world. They got off that bus. They had their pants down here, sneakers untied. They had, attitude and this and that. They were kind of rocking and rolling. And they were good kids, but just rolling from what they used. That's how they roll. And so this guy, me, I'm talking about two scenarios. What made a bias I had, and then what a bias against me. So you can see how it works on both sides of the fence. Because a lot of times with my Caucasian peers, if I say just something from their perspective, and they think, well, you just being biased by just talking about us. So I'm gonna talk about myself first, and then I'm gonna share something relating to something that happened to me. And so these kids came off the bus, and now I said to one of the people that was with me, man, this is gonna be an interesting weekend. Now I'm there to inspire these young folks. I'm there to encourage these young folks. I'm there to bring the best out of these young folks, pray for these young folks, spend time with these young folks, teach them life skills. And the moment they stepped off that bus, and I'm from Syracuse, New York, I've seen that growing up with it. I made a judgment, you see, and that leads me to my first point when it comes to this implicit bias thing. The world we were raised in shapes our paradigms, or the world we accept. Think about those two things. This is important. The world we were raised in shaped our paradigms, or the world we accept. So in the case of the bias I'm sharing with you right now, it wasn't like I was raised in a world where, we got it. It's just us the kids being kids. But then I accepted something temporarily. I've been since removed that foolishness, that these kids, because they were dressed that way, it's going to be a long weekend. So keep that in mind. The world we were raised in shaped our paradigms from a race perspective, or what we accept. Because a lot of people look like me that have accepted a different perception of people who look like me. It's just the reality of it. It happens. Okay. And so the next day we were playing basketball out on the court, and I was like, at the time, 30 years old, 29 years old. I'm going to show these young kids how to play some basketball. I got to put my Michael Jordan game on it, put my moves on it, and all of that. And as you're watching this, who's ever watching, if you want to put something in the chat feature to kind of, again, let's keep it respectful, nothing foolish, but your thoughts or your experiences, or, how you've handled this, or if you work with an organization, how you're currently handling it. I would love to hear from you. But, so I'm on the court and I'm showing these kids, this game. I'm gonna show them how to play some hoops. Check this out. I went up and made a move, and I'm gonna show these kids. I'm gonna dunk on them, man. I'm gonna show them some stuff here. And all of a sudden I'm laying on my back. And so I said, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be up in there dunking. Why am I on my back? What happened? And I looked down. This is a little gross. And my kneecap was sitting in my thigh. And I'm like, why is my kneecap sitting there? And then I realized I ruptured my patella tendon, totally severed my kneecap. Not severed, but it came off. and it was sitting up in my leg. My kids, who I love dearly, the ones we work with, they say, "You all right, Mr. Andrews?" They didn't call me Coach B back then. "Mr. Andrews, you okay?" I said, "I don't think so." Like my kneecap is sitting up in my leg. The kids from Perth Amboy ran over to me, scooped me up, took me to the infirmary, and would not leave until they found out that I was okay. Now, let's paint this picture. When I first saw these kids, I'm saying this is going to be a long weekend. When I get injured, the first ones to respond was the kids from Perth Amboy. Scoop, my kids still looking at me. They probably wondering where are they taking them? The kids that are part of our program. And I'm saying this to show you how biases can affect the way we think about things. You see what I'm saying? And how that scenario taught me something. Never judge a book by its cover. Read the book first. That's a foundational building block to race relations. The cover is what's in the media. The cover is what people may have said about a race. A cover is what little side conversations that people have, you know, the way you dress or the way you talk or the way you walk or the way you look. You know what I mean? The cover is, you know, in the case of police, and there's so many, most police departments get so many, and Dr. Eberhardt talks about this in her book, so many calls on their, you know, what do they call those things where they, you know, they get their notices from the police department but they said, you know, so many times they hear over intercom, I guess you'll call it, that black man or black person, that in their minds, that's the cover, man, that if it's a black person, sometimes it's going to be violent. And the point I'm making is this, you know, the story I just shared with you, I could have easily thought that those kids would be, but the reality were they were the ones that had the heart. They were the ones that cared. They were the ones that took the time. And it changed my perspective so much that there you go. We have to learn to withhold judgment and lean into to learn. Absolutely, Stacy, we do. Because if we go by judgment based upon the cover, other words, what people say and what the media says, what's in a book, a perception, things like that, then we can never get to first base as far as change is concerned. So that's my story of how I was biased. All right. So hopefully that'll lower the bar. So when I share what I'm about to share, you can understand why people think the way they think, because you think people make this stuff up and they're not making it up. So let me tell you what happened bias against me. So years ago, I lived in a little town. I'll just say the name of the town. It was called Media, Pennsylvania. And they had a bank called Elmwood Trust Bank. And that bank no longer exists. And so years ago, that's where I did my banking. And so one day I was in the bank. I was going to do a transaction. I didn't have a whole lot of money in it anyway. I was broke as a joke. I was going into that bank to do a little transaction. All of a sudden, I look out the window. There were 10 to 15 police cars outside the bank. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, man, there's somebody robbing the bank. And I'm hoping, I'm glad the police are here. Now, I'm serious. That's what I'm thinking. I said, I'm so glad that they're here because somebody robbing this bank and I hope they find them. Who is it? I'm looking in line trying to figure out who it is. Those police officers in full number pop through that door, come to me and yank me out of that line, slam me up against the wall with my face against the wall, handcuff me, and I got like 10 cops around me. And I'm thinking, you got the wrong person. I'm not the bank robber. I'm not the robber. Find the right person. And when I turned around and said, I'm not the person you're trying to, the guy took his little stick out. Back then they had those little things and he shoved it in my face and said, shut your effing mouth. Police officer. And now I'm scared. Because I'm a first generation college graduate. I went to school to get a degree so I can better my life. I'm working to improve my quality of life. I did everything I could to stay away from trouble, never committed a crime, never did anything wrong. And here I am about to get arrested in a bank. And then all the people started lining the windows looking at me like, who's that criminal? Then the chief of police walked in. And I said to myself, whatever I didn't do that they think that I did, I'm in a whole lot of trouble. And he goes back into the back with the bank manager. And I didn't know how to pray back then, but I prayed. Whatever it is, please don't allow this to happen to me. I'm a first generation college graduate. I'm trying to make a life for myself. I said, I don't want this. This is not what I want to do. I didn't come this far and fight so hard and to go to jail. And then the police chief came out, yeah. Okay. There you go. And yeah, you probably did. Yeah, Stacy, absolutely. And yep, right there. And he said to the police officers, he said, take the cuffs off of him and let him go. And as my arms were like red and all of that, I turned and I looked at one of the officers and said, what was that all about? And he turned this around and put the stick in my face again and said, shut your stinking mouth. And they all walked out the door. And I walked up to the bank manager, all these people looking at me and embarrassed and feeling like less than life. And I asked the bank manager, I said, what was that all about? She said, I'm sorry, sir. It was a case of mistaken identity. I could end up in jail because of mistaken identity. Now that's an extreme, but what I'm talking about is I shared two scenarios, how I looked at the kids in that scenario and then how someone looked at me. All right. And both of them are, the one that happened to me was an extreme bias. Black man fit a certain mold. He's the one. Call the cops, arrest him, even though thank goodness I didn't get arrested. All right. So those are two stories that I want to lead into what I'm talking about with this implicit bias thing, because there's those kind of scenarios where people it's right there in your face, it's overt. But then there's situations where people just don't know because they've been blinded by untruths for so long or incorrect paradigm that they think that what they know is right, even though it's wrong. And we sometimes do things or say things that they don't realize has racial undertones. Like, for instance, let me explain this one to you. Share this one. Like, I may say something about Black Lives Matter. Let's share that. And they don't realize, a lot of people don't realize Black Lives Matter is a phrase. There is an organization, but there's a phrase. Not everybody supports the organization, but a lot of people support the phrase. Because if you're Black, your life does matter to you, your kids and to many of my Caucasian friends, your lives matter as well. And their lives matter to me. I mean, we matter. But for the sake of Black Lives Matter, a lot of people say that because we've been so suppressed and oppressed for so many years that people just feel like we got to get that message out. But people would like to box it into, the organization and not look at the general message. Okay. And when it comes to, so I'll make that statement, let's say, and then I'll get attacked, and then this is what'll come up. This is where we have the bias. People start talking about Obama. They started talking about all the Black people they know. They start talking about all these different things, and in particular politics. Then they'll talk about me supporting Biden and Kamala and all these different things. And I'll say to them, but wait a minute, I never said anything about any of those people. I never even brought them into the conversation. Why are you claiming that I'm this? Why are you claiming I'm a Democrat? Why are you claiming this is about Obama? I hate Trump. I never said any of that. I just said that a life matters. And so what I'm trying to say is when we're going to start dealing with implicit biases, you got to realize the way you respond to situations tells people a lot about what you think. It's like, and that immediately leads people to say, okay, this person has a serious bias and they think that all Black people fit a certain mold, and that's not true. You know what I mean? So one thing I want to add to this conversation is that, again, The world we were raised in shapes our paradigms. And sometimes we say things because of the purview that we have, even though it could be incorrect. That's why studying biases is so important. Another thing is who and what we buy into determines if we can change. Like if we have friends who have accepted these biases, or if we listen to talk show hosts that have accepted these biases, or if we're in a group or community that accepted certain biases, then you know what? Even though my organization may have an initiative where they're trying to embrace black and brown people, let's say, then all of a sudden I struggle with that because my circle does not accept that. This we have this narrative that we've embraced. And so I'm just uncomfortable with having that conversation because I think that I'm right about this. You know what I mean? I'm right about this particular bias that I have. And again, for a lot of these biases, really it's perpetuated by the media. It's perpetuated by, it could be by a variety of different things. And so this conversation, really becomes difficult because you may have a group of people that want to change. Then you got another group that don't want to. And as we can see in our country, this is not going anywhere. People are going to stay the course with this one because they're ready for us to get on equal footing with all of this, to start looking at each individual as equal, all right, in the way from a work perspective, from an education perspective, from a life perspective, from a career perspective, from a criminal crime perspective. If a person commits a crime and they're worthy of a particular, type of retribution, then deal with it. But the reality is when it's unbalanced, and 12% of the population represents 70% of the inmates, that's an imbalance. And so people are going to always say that's a problem. We can't think that that's just going to go away on its own. And that leads me to this last point. That is, unless we're willing to come together and have a conversation. All right. Like when there's a warfare, and I'm not trying to say this is warfare. In some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. But if there's a warfare, okay, and there's a war going on, unless the two warring factions come together and make a peace treaty or some type of agreement on how they're going to handle things, the war continues. There's some wars that have been fought out here that have been fighting for the last 30, 40 years because the two sides were unwilling to have a conversation. So let me say this. In our country, what's nice is, even though it's not happening on a national level, individual organizations are, and I'm proud of you for that. They're training their people. They're having ongoing dialogues. They're gathering information. They're reading books. They're asking people to share their perspectives from both sides, from both sides, black and white, brown and white, whatever. I mean, just from both sides. And so that's the beginning of a conversation in which understanding could take place, because right now there's so much misunderstanding. And the key has to be for each person individually to make the choice to decide that I want to change for the right reason. All right. For the right reason. I remember speaking at a school district. I'm an author of a book entitled Believe in the Hype, 7 Keys to Motivating Students of Color. So as I mentioned, I do work in schools, and a lot of schools, and we do organizations and everything, corporations, but we do a lot in schools as well, workforce groups, but schools. So I'm doing this presentation and we're having this conversation I'm having with you. And right in the middle of the conversation, a teacher stands up and she's in full blown tears, crying her heart out. And I'm thinking to myself, what did I say in that presentation that caused that response? And she, in the middle of the presentation, said, you know what? I'm tired of faking this. I'm tired of having these conversations in the teacher's lounge. I'm tired of going into my world and everybody saying negatives about these young kids that I work with, young black kids. And she said, I am biased. She said, every day I look at my kids and I see them dressed a certain way or acting a certain way, and I immediately label them. And what coach is saying has my eyes open to the fact that that's wrong. It's wrong for me to see those young people that way. And so I shared the story just like I shared with you about what happened with me with ththose young kids from Perth Amboy. And she started to realize that I need to change the way I see things in order to be more of a benefit to the people I'm serving, which are those young people. We can take that in the corporate perspective. I need to change the way I see things so I can see a better way of interacting with my customers. I need to change the way I see things so I can interact in the case of workforce development more effectively with my clients and my coworkers. So see these biases until recognized, that woman recognized it. She didn't get angry because you had the conversation. She wasn't mad that her school district brought in someone to talk about this. She opened up, and what happened was a bunch of people hugged her, and we're about 200 people there. About 150 of them agreed. We're going to analyze this. We're going to look at this, and we're going to make some adjustments in the school. I stayed in touch with that school, and within 3 months, that school changed. Everything changed. The kids were more excited about their academic experience. The parents were appreciating the way that the children were treated. I'm telling you why, because they decided not to get mad because somebody said they had a bias, to recognize that they did and make the adjustments. I can tell you hundreds of stories like this, hundreds. But the reality is that still there's a lot of people who want to point fingers and say, you're the problem and you're the problem. Even though we can share a story about discrimination or share a story about racial biases and all these things. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We need to see the way we see things as an organization. We can achieve our key business imperatives. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely, Stacy. And so it's so important that we can't ignore biases, because in some cases, I'm going to say this, and I've said this around some of my fellow African Americans, black folk, they get offended by it. But I said, not everybody's a racist. Some people just lack information, because they have people that they know, they're engaging with people of color. They eat lunch, break bread, but on occasion they may say things that they don't realize is bias. I had to share that with a few people I know. They would say things about, the race, and I would say, you know what, you got to realize I'm black too. You know what I mean? You got to realize that I'm black too. And so when you say that, you're talking about the race, which means you're talking about me. And so think about this subject as something that maybe you should have some conversations with your staff or your school or your organization or your students, because young people have it too. Young people have it too. I was at this one organization on vacation. I won't mention the name of it. And I was doing a boat ride, and this one young lady was on the boat, trying to be cordial. She looked at me and she said to me, "What part of the inner city of Philadelphia do you live in?" What part of the inner city of Philadelphia do you live in? And I said, "Young lady, I live in the suburbs in Delaware. I don't live in the inner city of Philadelphia. I have nothing against the inner city of Philadelphia." But she didn't realize at the age of maybe 18 that that's a biased way of thinking, because she saw me as black. And I don't know why she thought Philadelphia, because where we were located, it could have been Baltimore, it could have been other places, but she said Philadelphia. But in that girl's world, that's where black people live. That's where we operate. That's where we do things. So I don't think she intended to be disrespectful, but she was. And it's because in her world, that's normal conversation. So if we're going to deal with implicit biases, we got to think about the way we communicate, the way we see people, and get some knowledge to be able to shift so that things that we don't know come off as racist in our conversations, we can be aware of it and make adjustments. So hope this information helps. We do a lot of training and development in this arena. We got customers throughout the country that I'm working with, and I'm proud of them. I'm proud of people who are taking the time. And I always tell people, my company, we don't do diversity programs or anything like that. We have conversations and about equity and inclusion to get people to start thinking differently and really more to open their eyes to the incorrect stuff that's been put out here in society about how to deal with folks. Because a lot of times it's just incorrect information. Remember that book cover and narrative? It's that book cover that's been, instead of reading the book, it's making a decision by just looking at the cover and not reading the book. So hopefully this information is helpful. Stacy, thank you for your participation. I know there are others, but sometimes you can't see their post on my stream. And if any questions, you can reach out to us at coachdSpeaks Our website is coachdspeaks.com. And, our email is info@coachdspeaks.com. We're doing a lot of these equity journeys with people, organizations. Again, we don't do diversity programs. To me, I've seen those for years. They don't work because it starts here in our hearts. And we can't do that with just a bunch of posters on the wall. It takes people having real world conversations. And that's what we do at my company. We help people have these conversations to come to the realization for themselves of the need to change so that we really, hate to use this term, but it's the reality of it. We're going to be great. We're not going to be a great country until all people in our country are on equal footing. We will never make that goal, until we get there. But I'm proud of the organizations and industries who are now making this a priority and doing something to make a difference. So reach out to us if you have any questions. If your organization would like to have a strategy call to maybe have a conversation about this and see if it works for you or fits for you, we're here to help. This is what we do, train and develop, have been for 20 plus years, and got some wonderful customers out there that we're doing some neat things with and impacting a lot of lives as a result. Take care.